Islamic countries that he relies on for economic support. The United States has a very delicate balancing act that they have to make sure what they do ask Pakistan to do does not essentially cause the conditions for a civil war, which certain people inside Pakistan would be happy to see happen because it would push them right over the edge into the Islamic revolution that they really want to have there.
On that note, we've got to wind it up from New York City. I want to thank all our guests, Mansour Ijaz of the Crescent Investment Management Firm, Patricia Chadwick of Ravengate Partners out in Los Angeles, Larry Elder of KABC Radio, and our two correspondents that helped us tonight, Major Garrett at the White House and Gary Tuchman. This has been CNN Hotline. I'm Jack Cafferty. Good night from New York City.
Almost 6 days since the tallest symbols of the financial capital of the world collapsed, the hunt intensifies for the terrorists responsible.
And through the night, rescue and recovery crews work in what's left of the World Trade Center, not giving up hope, not yet.
Meanwhile, anxious brokers around the world await the resumption of trade on the New York Stock Exchange. Hello, I'm Michael Holmes.
And I'm Colleen McEdwards at CNN Center. This is CNN's continuing coverage of America's new war.
Okay, let's first bring you up to date now on the latest developments in the investigation on Tuesday's attack. Sources tell us here at CNN that 2 new arrest warrants have been issued for material witnesses sought in connection with the attacks. No details made public as yet. 2 other people already in custody, of course, on material witness warrants. FBI agents have searched an apartment in Delray Beach, Florida. It is believed to have been the home of one suspected hijacker on board the United Airlines flight that crashed in Pennsylvania. Now, another hijacking suspect may have lived in the same complex. President George W. Bush will meet with his national security and economic teams on Monday morning as leaders in the United States continue discussions on how they will respond to the attacks. Mr. Bush is encouraging Americans, meanwhile, to be resilient, even as they mourn.
Tomorrow when you get back to work hard like you always have. But we've been warned. We've been warned there are evil people in this world. We've been warned so vividly. And we'll be alert. Your government is alert. The governors and mayors are alert that evil folks still lurk out there.
Aides to the president say he will focus his energies in 2 main directions this week, planning a response and encouraging Americans to return to normal lives.
Well, President Bush spoke with King Abdullah of Jordan and Mexican President Vicente Fox on Sunday. The calls to world leaders are part of his intensive efforts to muster up international support for any possible action. U.S. leaders acknowledge, though, that any fight against terrorism will be long and it will be complex.
The United States needs assistance from countries with intelligence information. We need assistance from countries to deny terrorists and terrorist networks the access to their real estate and their facilities. We need them to cooperate in a host of ways if this goal is going to be achieved. My guess is there will be a number of different coalitions that will be functioning over time. Some will be able to do some things, others will be able to do other things. And how that will work and how that will play out, I think it's hard to say at the moment. But the one thing you can be sure is it'll take a lot of time. It'll take years, not days.
A high-level Pakistani delegation is in Afghanistan carrying a message from the United States. Afghanistan's ruling Taliban has been giving support to Saudi dissident Osama bin Laden, named by U.S. officials as the prime suspect in the attacks, named by the president as well. The message gives the Taliban 72 hours to hand over bin Laden. Pakistan is one of only 3 countries that recognizes the Taliban as the government of Afghanistan and keeps relations with it. But the Pakistan government says it will fully back international efforts against terrorism.
we need to keep our focus where it really belongs, which is how to fight this menace to ensure also that there is security in the region where my country is situated. We are situated in a very volatile and dangerous part of the world. Obviously, we seek longer-term security and peace in our region. As I said, there is an immediate response, but we also have to look longer-term to see that we have an approach that deals with some of the underlying reasons which give rise to people who hold extremist views.
I want to take you back to New York City. Now the search for survivors continues there through the night, but no one has been found alive in the wreckage of the World Trade Center since Wednesday. New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani says the likelihood of finding survivors is fading, but rescue efforts are going to continue until all hope is gone.
The hope is still there that we might be able to save some lives, but the reality is that in the last several days we haven't found anyone.
Well, nearly 5,000 people still missing in New York and many survivors still facing a battle.
Just getting into work about 8:45. Getting out of the elevator, walking in the hallway. I was on 83rd floor of the first tower. All of a sudden, as I'm walking in the hallway, I hear a door explode and just this big ball of fire just engulfed me. I just froze. I didn't do anything. I just stood there.
And just to update you on the attack at the Pentagon, the identities of 2 of the victims there have now been confirmed. 186 other people are still missing and presumed dead. Michael?
Well, blocks away from the World Trade Center site, the New York Stock Exchange will resume trading in just over 7 hours from now. The exchange, of course, closed since Tuesday. Before the day's buying and selling begins, however, traders will hold 2 minutes of silence at the traditional opening time. That's 9:30 a.m. Then the singing of God Bless America. Well, day 6 of the investigation found U.S. authorities very busy in a number of locations. In San Diego, FBI agents have interviewed the operator of a flying club, where at least one of the suspected hijackers may have sought pilot training. The club turned Khalid Al-Midha and another man away because they couldn't speak English well enough to understand the lessons. Investigators say Al-Midha was on board the plane that crashed into the Pentagon. They have also linked him to the bombing of the USS Cole. With more now on the investigation, let's go to CNN's Mike Betcher.
The FBI was back at this apartment house in South Florida, taking away evidence. It's believed to be the residence of Saeed Al-Ghamdi, one of the suspected hijackers on United Flight 93. At least one other hijacker on the same flight may have lived in the same building. All over the country, leads are being pursued. 2 more arrests for material witnesses were issued. 2 people are already in custody. And in New Jersey, just across the river from New York, another apartment was searched. This one was the residence of one, possibly both men, picked up off an Amtrak train allegedly carrying cash, airline tickets, and box cutters. But the top of the most wanted list has not changed and will not, according to U.S. officials. But the effort to add suspect names after Osama bin Laden is accelerating both in the U.S. and internationally.
He headed it up and organized it, but it's a very broad, kind of loose coalition of groupings. It includes not only his forces, but it also includes, for example, Islamic Jihad from Egypt.
Members of Egyptian Islamic Jihad filled the top ranks of bin Laden's al-Qaeda organization. Islamic Jihad's leader, Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, was at bin Laden's side during this 1998 press conference. Widely considered bin Laden's chief lieutenant, Zawahiri is also his personal doctor. Like bin Laden, he's believed to be in Afghanistan. Bin Laden denied he was responsible in a statement released Sunday through an Arabic-language satellite news channel. As for me, I have been living in the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan and following its leader's rules, he said. The current leader does not allow me to exercise such operations.
He's a prime suspect, but we have to be realistic. This is not a person. That's the problem. It is a whole host of people and a whole host of countries that are harboring those people.
The head U.S. officials are sure of, bin Laden, but hidden under the cloak of al-Qaeda's mastermind, a complex organization. harder to identify, and just as their leader, elusive. Mike Betcher, CNN, Atlanta.
Bye. And now we want to bring you more on the search and recovery effort in New York City. It's a little bit after 2 in the morning there. And joining us now from Lower Manhattan, CNN's Gary Tuchman. Gary, one thing that has been cooperating is the weather. It's a clear night there tonight.
It's been clear every night since this disaster happened, except for one night it rained very hard for 12 hours, but the search conditions have been very good. Unfortunately, the search itself hasn't been very successful. We are about to start a new work week, which makes us think a lot about the old work week that just passed. On Monday morning, when people woke up and drove to the World Trade Center, their biggest problem in most cases was crowded subways and crowded roadways. The same thing for Tuesday, but then all hell broke loose. And this is what we have right now as this new work week starts. The World Trade Center complex is gone. Instead, we have a flaming, smoky cauldron, which has become a temporary graveyard for up to 5,000 people right now. It is a very sad situation. The search continues, but no one has been found alive since early Wednesday morning, but they are still trying to find survivors. We want to show you pictures from above the scene. We haven't been able to show you such pictures because the airspace above the scene has been closed. We now have this video which shows you the void where the World Trade Center complex used to stand. You see the buildings surrounding it. Many of those buildings are damaged. Others could eventually be condemned. Now, earlier today, we talked with a policeman from the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. This policeman was inside the North Tower of the World Trade Center when it collapsed. He was on the 4th floor. He was a canine officer. He lost his dog, but he survived.
Well, seeing there wasn't much, we were covering up the civilian Josephine Harris. We just on the ground, hearing it sounded like a rushing locomotive or an avalanche coming at us. And feeling, it was the feeling that I was going to die. You know, that's the only thing I could think at the time. And it went from I was going to die to no, I'm going to live and go home and see my family.
Wow. You were trapped for how long?
We were trapped for approximately 4 to 5 hours.
What did you do during that time before you were rescued?
Well, we radioed for help with using our walkie-talkies, the fire department and myself. And we would try to keep each other's spirits up, trying to get through on our cell phones to our families. And
did you make a connection?
We finally did. Yes.
Wow.
I got through to my wife, and I spoke to her. It was a personal conversation, of course. But then I told her that I would have to give the phone up to the other firemen, and it was only right that they had to call their families just in case, of course.
Up to 60 police officers are missing. Up to 300 firefighters are missing. Now, life will change for many people who survive this and have to go back to work. For example, the U.S. Secret Service. The U.S. Secret Service New York office was in the World Trade Center. Now they put a temporary office right across the street from where I'm standing now, 5 blocks away from the World Trade Center, in a Portuguese restaurant. Pino's Restaurant happens to be a 3.5-star Portuguese restaurant here in the Tribeca neighborhood of New York. It's closed down now because this neighborhood is closed off to the public. The U.S. Secret Service has taken the restaurant over, and right now that's where the Secret Service personnel are meeting, inside that restaurant. One other thing I want to mention, an extraordinary sight I saw yesterday, New York time, during the day on Sunday in the middle of the afternoon. Right in the middle of Central Park is an area called the Sheep Meadow. Sheep Meadow is as big as about 10 football fields. It's called the Sheep Meadow because in the early days of New York City, sheep used to wander around there, but now people go there to get suntans, to have picnics, to throw frisbees around. There are probably about 1,000, 1,100, 1,200 people in the Sheep Meadow today. When about 3 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern time, a fire truck came down the road next to the Sheep Meadow, and the fire truck had a huge American flag on top of it. I started to hear some clapping, and then before you knew it, everybody in the Sheep Meadow was applauding loudly, many of them giving standing ovations to the people in the fire truck. It was a sight and a sound that no one there will ever forget. Colleen, back to you.
Gary Tuchman, thanks so much for that. Appreciate it. Michael?
Okay. Efforts continue on the diplomatic front as well. On Sunday, top US leaders continued their work building a global coalition to conduct a campaign against the terrorists.
We will continue to work with Pakistan and India. We will work with Russia. We will work with the nations that one would have thought a couple of years ago would have been impossible to work with, to bring people to justice, but more than that, to win the war on against terrorist activity.
The key here to keep in mind is that what we're asking nations to do, and which the